All right, let's look this morning at how to get the number of VLFs in a log file. So this is just dbcc log info, or part one of dbcc log info. And so let's go ahead and just show that executed. You can see that there are 12 VLFs in this log file, which are virtual log files. Now we're going to be covering more in depth and detail in part two about dbcc log info. But be careful about the number of VLFs, because this can become busy work very quickly. And what I mean by that is a lot of VLFs, and you'll see people that'll say this is a concern, and maybe it is or not, are often an indication that you are engaging in, or an environment, I should say, is engaging in, because you may have inherited the environment, but where an environment's engaging in what I call log micromanagement. Log micromanagement is people who, they spend a lot of time thinking about, what is a log going to be? Should I have it 100 meg or 1 gig or 4 gig? And you can tell by my mockery voice that this is just stupid. What you should do is create what I call a high-low middle model, in my opinion. And the reason for this is so that it falls in that model, right? The high would be a big environment, the middle would be an average environment, and the low would be your kind of like a configuration database. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to get into my favorite joke. I don't know if y'all have ever seen Princess Bride, but I love the quote in Princess Bride when he's like, I can't afford to make an exception, because if I do, it's just work, 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 right? Like if you start creating all these exceptions to the rule, and I've worked in many environments that have hundreds of servers, I will go crazy, because I'm going to have to constantly remember why I did certain things a certain way. So if I just stick to a high-low middle model, I can save all kinds of mental energy. The other reason why I do this is because this is only for me. Most people will not say this, but this has definitely happened in my book, which is there seems to be a correlation between log micromanagement and integrity check failures, DBCC failures, right? And this may not be in your environment, but I've seen this a lot. Like I've never had an integrity check failure on a standard a high-low middle model, my standard approach to logs. Never had an integrity check failure. But every environment that I've seen integrity check failures, always engaged in log micromanagement. And for me at least, again, this makes sense because the log is one of the most important pieces in SQL Server. The transaction log is so important. And if you go around screwing it up, you can really screw things up, right? So these are just my best practices for logs. And yes, you can find 100 people on the internet to disagree, and I don't really care, because I probably can learn 10 times the speed of them, because I stick to a similar model. And my rules are you stick to a high-low middle model. In very exceptional cases, I allow for auto growth. Very exceptional. I create growth at 4 times the estimated use. So if a big environment's like, well, we're going to be running transactions of 100,000, I'm like, yeah, it's going to be closer to about 400,000. I back up full recovery logs with a frequency that matches the transaction volume in the environment. I run checkpoints frequently on simple recovery models. And then, of course, I teach developers how to batch transactions. I don't like seeing active transaction, that error that you get. But what I like about that error is it definitely means that the environment is locked in that growth and they can't get it past. And so it teaches developers you're going to have to learn how to batch things. And really, if you know anything about, this is more front end, but if you know anything about C# or PowerShell and bulk inserts and stuff, more often than not, you can test it yourself, but 10,000 to 100,000 in that range, that's going to be your threshold for speed. Just is. You start batching things at millions, and you're going to run into other problems. I'm not going to get into that, but if you do, like, let's say a data table, and you try to bulk copy, over 10,000 or 20,000, you're going to start hitting a wall pretty quickly. So, and that's just another thing that I've observed. So that's why I teach my developers how to batch transactions, because that's going to help them get better performance as well. Some DBAs do that and some DBAs don't, but that's my best practice for logs. I rarely allow auto growth. That's a very good way to get into trouble very quickly. So there are advantages to having it set at fixed growth, but setting it to that 4 times the estimated use, and that's sitting down with the developers and really getting a feel for what they're going to do.